May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Be seated. Have you ever been on a pilgrimage? Have you ever thought about going on a pilgrimage? Some of you are lucky enough to have maybe walked the Camino de Santiago in Spain, or visited Canterbury in England, or the Holy Land, or maybe closer to home, a trip to the National Cathedral or to a monastic house. Or maybe the closest you've ever gotten to a pilgrimage is watching The Way, the movie about 10 years ago that Emilio Estevez released, where Martin Sheen walked the Camino on behalf of his son, who had died unexpectedly. In the Middle Ages, of course, people thought that by going on a pilgrimage, you earned some merit. It's a very arithmetic approach. You could have sins forgiven, either for yourself or for someone else, and that was the purpose of making the trip. Nowadays, we don't believe that way, but a pilgrimage is the opportunity to leave behind the cares and distractions of everyday life and to get rid of some of the needless excess baggage we carry, whether that baggage is physical stuff that we clutter our lives with, or emotional stuff that we clutter our lives with, or spiritual excess baggage. And hopefully, the changes you make, the changes one makes on a pilgrimage, carry on when you come home. It's not just for the duration of that trip. You take on spiritual practices or have some new insight, or you have a commitment to a new way of life that stays with you when you come back and re-enter everyday life. So if we have this idea of pilgrimage as a journey on which we desire to be changed, then we're all on a pilgrimage, even if you never leave your own room. Even if your personal situation is such that you can't travel. Because to be human is to be built with a desire to know God. And we are all journeying to meet God face to face someday. It's what Paul was talking about in his second letter to the Corinthians, when he talks about the eternal weight of glory beyond measure, this idea that we're going to encounter God. So as long as you can think, and pray and draw breath, you can travel on this journey and make this pilgrimage and be changed. Day by day, grow ever more into God's kingdom. I'd like you to think about your life, our life together, but your life personally, as your response to God's invitation to us, which is renewed every year in the Jesus story. It's played out for us in our lectionary, starting in Advent and through Christmas and Epiphany and Lent and Easter and Ascension and Pentecost. We hear Jesus' life cycle, and then we respond to the Jesus story, and our response, our half of the conversation, is proclaimed most loudly in how we live our lives, how we go about our earthly journey, how we go about our pilgrimage. If we think about our life as a journey with a desire to be changed, then today's readings that we have just heard are both inviting and hopeful, but they are also profoundly challenging. The gospel passage we just heard comes early in Mark's gospel, And we hear Jesus say to those closest to him, whoever does the will of God is my brother and my sister and my mother. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and my sister and my mother. So Jesus, really early in his earthly ministry, starts out with this radical redefinition of family and of equality and of welcome and of invitation. And when you think about it, it stands over and against all of our notions of ancestry and physical ties and national identity and party loyalty. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and my sister and my mother. It's hopeful because it means that anybody can come in. And this radical welcome, this radical inclusion is the reason that Christianity has grown to be the largest faith group on earth. But in the early years, those who had nothing to lose, literally nowhere else to turn, no family, no connections, whose society said you are nothing, they now had a family. They now had an identity. They were now welcome and knew hope and knew love. And that's really the reason that Christianity, when truly understood and truly practiced, makes those on the outside feel very unsettled. Because they say, see how they love one another. And it's that love within the Christian family that matters, and no other outside relationship is as important. So we as Christ Church, here and now, need to look hard at ourselves and at this passage. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother. Because it says that doing the will of God is more important than family of origin. And it matters more than when or where you were born or how long you've been in the county or your party identity or your skin color. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother. And this is a hard message for today's world to hear, because contemporary society says the only source of moral authority is one's own desires. There's no sense of authority other than what you want, other than yourself. And Christianity, though, has always distrusted the devices and desires of our own hearts. We have known from the very beginning how easy it is for all of us to be tempted. And that's what we heard about with our first parents in Genesis in the first reading. The tempter came along and said, you will not die. When you eat that fruit, you will be like God. You will be like God. And that's what fallen humanity has always wanted, to be our own authority. Being our own authority has never satisfied us, but now society says it's the only way. Be your own God. It didn't work for our own first parents, and it doesn't work for us. Rather than us taking on that divinity, it gave us distrust and a ruptured relationship with God. But thanks be to God, God has never given up on us and always calls us home, always calls us back into relationship with him. And because of his invitation and his love drawing us, we are always on a journey back to him. So as you go on that journey this summer, this year, through the rest of your life, travel wisely. Travel wisely. We gather here each week to be fed and fortified with word and sacrament by God himself. We look for reliable companions along the way. But as you look for reliable companions on your pilgrimage, remember the standard. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother. I invite you as you journey to leave behind the cares and distractions of everyday life and get rid of excess baggage, whether that's physical things or emotional baggage or spiritual baggage. As you travel, prepare to be changed from glory to glory, because our destination is God Himself. Amen.